Good day and welcome to Afro Voice Radio. I am here today with our special guest, Auntie Esther Simbi, who is an incredible author, a wonderful South Sudanese leader here in South Australia. And she's published two books. So her first one was Beyond Calamity, and this book was released a few years ago, and she has now released a second one, which is called Bless. And she has been sharing her story as an African woman dealing with a disability, and how she has thrived through those challenges and some of those unnecessary stereotypes that are placed on women just by being women, but then also by being a black woman, and now a black woman with a disability. So your intersectionality is really, really broad and deepened. So today we're just going to have a conversation with her as an African woman living with a disability, how she's been able to thrive throughout her journey, and where she's at now. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, Auntie Esther. Congratulations on your second book. So how has been the publishing journey for the second book?
Thank you for having me here. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. So the second book, Blessed, Raising Two Daughters as a Single Mom with a Disability. So publishing this second book didn't take me as long as the first one. The second book only took me 2 years. The first one took me 8 years to get it published. Mainly because I think the reason why this one didn't take long time is because I went with the same publisher, and I already know what they want.
Yes.
So it was easy rather than going with a new publisher and then you have to start from zero, completing all those paperwork before you get to the editing stage, and then even during the editing there is still more paperwork to complete. So yeah, I went with the same publisher, and yeah, the second book took me 2 years to publish.
What was your vision behind the second book? Because I have read the first one, Beyond Calamity, and it was a powerful story of your journey through South Sudan, and how you were able to migrate to Australia and some of the challenges that you faced. So with this second book, Bless, is there like a sequel from the first one? Is there a continuation from your story there?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's the continuation from my story from first book, but it mainly focuses on how disability has impacted on me as a person in having relationships, and how I'm now raising two daughters as a single mom with a disability. So it's all about relationships and raising children as a single mom with a disability, and also how I'm getting around being a person living with a disability, like the day-to-day activities, including budgeting, having single income, all of that. So that's what is in this book. Even preparing meals, and
That's incredible, because I think a lot of times when we look at disability, especially within the African community, it's not a conversation that we have often. Sometimes even with community members who are disabled, we don't address them as people with disability, because I don't think prior to migrating to Australia we had a word for it. We just knew that something was not right with that person. Have you faced a lot of, let's say, community backlash with the advocacy around your disability and being so vocal about it?
So from the beginning, I have faced issues where people didn't pay attention to what I was saying. Others thought that I was crazy to even be talking about disability, which is kind of a taboo. For example, like in my culture, talking about disability is a taboo. Children with disabilities are hidden in the family, they are hidden in the community, because my culture believes that disability is a curse, that the parents did something and they might have been cursed. That's why they have a child or children with disabilities. And because of that, nobody wants to associate with them. And because of that, the parents of children with disabilities in my community, what they do is they hide the children away, so that when people come to that family, they will not know that there is someone there with a disability. Even recently, I attended a training about disability, and somebody said, even here in Australia is happening, that a pastor has been visiting another family. This family goes to the church, and nobody knew that this family has a child with a disability in the house. until one day the pastor was shocked. So these practices are still happening, where people hide children with disabilities in the house or in the community. And so yeah, for me it has been a really long journey. I have always been vocal about the way how people with disabilities are treated. When I was growing up, like, decisions were made for me. I was not involved in any kind of decision-making process. I was given what they thought was good for me, and I was expected to go with that, and I was not expected to question anything. And even here in Australia, even the government used to do the same thing, where they tell people with a disability what to do and when to do it and how to do it. They were given what they thought was good for them. Until the NDIS came in. That's when people with disabilities started to have a voice. They started to have a choice and control over their lives and control over their support. So my journey had been a really a long one, and because people were not paying attention, like I was talking and others were laughing at me, they thought that I was crazy to even start talking about disability issues. And also the fact that I started talking about disability issues as a young girl, that was another problem. Like, older people should always be the one to talk. Like, older people's voice should be the one to be heard. But here I was, a young girl, and I was trying to get my voice to be heard. That was really hard. But it has paid off, because now people are starting to listen, and people are starting to understand. And for me, I've always used myself as an example. Like, having a disability is not the end of the world. People with disabilities can make a life. They can live a life like any other able-bodied person. I use myself as an example. I have a disability. I went to school, I went to the university, I graduated with a degree in social work. I graduated with a master's degree in mediation and conflict resolution. I went to work, I did all that any other person was doing. And I had children, and I'm raising children now. I took 5 years off when my youngest was born to raise children. But when she started school in January, I went back to work, and now I'm working again. So people with disabilities should be included in the community. There should be that culture of acceptance. I just want people, like, to move out of the stereotype where people with disabilities were considered as a curse, as they were possessed with evil spirit, to accept people with disabilities, because they have a lot to contribute into society if they're given the right kind of support. So yeah, it has been a really long journey for me.
No, I can imagine. And then adding the fact that you are now a single mother on top of your disability, what are some of the challenges you've encountered?
So the challenges that I have encountered as being a single mom is hard enough, like, to be a parent, but being a single parent with a disability.
With a disability.
Yeah, it has been really challenging. There are times when I feel like I need time to myself, but I can't have that because there's nobody to look after my children. I do have now support workers who look after my children for a few hours, but that's just few hours. There's nothing like a weekend away for me without the children, or somebody is taking my children for sleepover, like other parents or other relatives do to other parents, which is really nice. For me, I don't have that. I don't have my parents who could give me time out to look after my children. So it's been really hard. And getting around in the house, things like waking up in the morning, getting the kids ready for school, and then driving them to school, preparing meals, going shopping, all those kind of things have been really challenging. But I would like to say that I have been blessed. I have been blessed, and my children and I have, we learn from each other quite a lot, and we have adjusted into the kind of life that we have, and we help each other. My children are not perfect. They they don't listen as other people's children. But yeah, my 10-year-old is starting to cook. She helps around the house only when she wants to. Yes, yes. Only when she wants to. But yeah, it has been hard, and I love being a parent, and I have loved the past 10 years of being a parent, and that was really good.
You mentioned earlier that this book touches on dating and what it's like. I know dating as an African woman in Australia is already difficult as it is, but now dating as an African woman who has a disability, how have you been maneuvering within that context?
So it has been really hard, like having relationships. People, there is that concept of in the South Sudanese community where there are men out there who want to be with women with disabilities, but they only want to do that in the night where, where nobody is looking. Yes. And then during the day they are gone. Yeah. So that did not happen to me, just that I wanted to have a long relationship, and that's where the problem came. Okay. Yeah, so it was not easy like to have a long relationship because of the stigma attached to disability. Like they feel embarrassed walking with me on the street. They feel embarrassed being seen in public with me. And they feel embarrassed, like even like me mentioning that so-and-so is my partner or my boyfriend. They feel embarrassed. They don't want to be identified with me. Yes. Like they just want to live their own life. And then in where there is nobody looking, that's
they want to call you.
Yeah. Wow. So it has been really tough. And especially in 2015 and 2016, I experienced a lot of abuse, emotional abuse and financial abuse. I was in a relationship with this guy. It has been a very long relationship, like on and off, on and off, on and off. And so, and then the family got involved when I was running for parliament. So I don't know if that was the main reason why they wanted me to be with him. They were actually chasing me up, like they want me to be with him. And so he was like kind of in the background. He was speaking a little bit, but the relatives were in the forefront. Yeah, they were the ones speaking for him. And so I'm like, okay, because they had been nice to me, I accepted to have a relationship with him. But then I realized that they only wanted him to stay with me, but not pay rent, not contribute in any way. So him and I, we had an agreement that he will pay the rent, and I will, because when I met him, he was not working, he was not studying. And then he started studying, and then he started working, but still a few shifts here and there. So we decided that let him pay the rent, and then I will pay the rest of the things, bills and all of that, and the food and all of that, and my daughter's childcare fees until his hours were increased. But then things didn't actually really work out well. So that kind of like emotional, like he wants to be with me, he doesn't want to be with me.
Decisive.
Yeah, he wants to be with me, he doesn't want to. And like when I noticed that he doesn't want to be with me, I will start doing my own things. And then when he noticed that I'm not focused on him, he will start being nice and bring me closer. And when I'm closer, he will start pushing me away. Yeah. So it's been like that, like for 2 whole years. Like I was really in that kind of emotional torture, like bring me closer and then push me away, bring me closer and push me away. Yeah. So it was really hard. And then in the end, when our youngest was born, 2 weeks after she was born, he just left. And that was it. And it was really a struggle. Since then, I have not really, I kind of like lost interest in having relationships. Now that I have my 2 daughters, I'm just focusing on raising my 2 daughters and focusing on work. And he's not even paying child support. So I have to deal with all of that. Yeah, paying school fees and paying other extracurricular like piano lessons and all of that. Yeah.
That is a lot to take on your own, and you have so much going on in your life, and having to deal with a father who is absent in his children's life. It's not just stressful for you, but imagine what your daughters are experiencing when Father's Day comes around and the dads are not there. So what sort of conversations are you having with your daughters around not having a father present? Because I know in a lot of our cultures that is very normal, where the men, some of the men don't stay. They leave and they go and have other relationships elsewhere, and they leave a child who is lacking that fatherly support or that fatherly love. So how are you supporting your children through that?
It was difficult with my older one when he left in 2016. Emotionally, it reached an extent where some days, especially when he comes around, not anymore, but he used to come around like for 2, 3, 5 minutes, and then he would be gone, just to torture us. So when he comes and when he's gone, my daughter would throw herself on the ground and she will cry and she will cry. She wants daddy, she wants daddy. And there came a time in 2016 when he wasn't answering my calls anymore, and that was really difficult. But I have been able to deal with that situation and talk to my my daughter, the younger one, and the older one, and now the younger one, the two of them. Like, I'm here, and I'll always be here. I love them, and I also give them an example of myself. I grew up without my dad, and here I am today. It doesn't mean that if you don't have your dad in your life, you're less of a human.
Yes.
If he's there, that's fine. If he's not there, life moves on. We don't have to stress about it, because stressing about it, crying about it, worrying about it, or going to sleep without food is not going to bring him back. And there was something I said one day. I said, if he was like a kid, we could force him to come back. But he's not a kid. We cannot force him to come back, and I certainly cannot force him to have a relationship with me. I cannot force myself to him. I have given him a lot of opportunities, even during that tough time when I was going through a lot of pain after he left. I was still allowing him to speak with the children, to come back to see the children. But that 5-minute thing, there's no commitment. If he was like committed, like he would come, organize something, come and take the children out on Saturday, go and play or do something with the children, and then bring them back like maybe a few hours later, or even organize a day for the children to go and have a sleepover. I didn't refuse that for him, but he doesn't have the time. His work is always his first priority, and that has been really hard. So the children had also seen that, how he's not interested. So if it was like he was really interested, he really wanted the children, it would have been really very hard for me to deal with the emotions of the children. But because he's not interested, so the children kind of, they don't care. So that's the situation.
Okay. With everything you've dealt with, and you're dealing with raising your children as a single mother, what are some of the strategies you have in place to look after yourself?
Okay.
What do you do to look after? What is your mental health self-care? And how do you prioritize ensuring that you are good? Because in order for your children to be good, you also have to be good.
And for my children to be happy, I have to be happy.
Exactly. Happy mother, happy life.
Yes. So what I've done is I have a plan where my children go to sleep early. So when my children go to sleep early, I will have 2 hours rest before I go to bed myself. And in those 2 hours, I either sing, I like to sing. I play music and then I sing along, or I just watch a nice movie before I go to bed. And so before I started work, when my children are at school and childcare, what I do, I catch up with friends during the day, go for lunch or meet for coffee, or just talk on the phone, and beside the writing, So that's how I've been managing myself. During the day, I go for lunch and then come back and rest a little bit before I go pick the children up. And when I pick them up, of course, they miss me all day. They want me, so that time is for them in the evening. I normally don't make phone calls in the evening unless if I have to. So that's how I have been managing myself. And positive approach to life. I am a positive person. Having positive attitude, that has really taken me a long way. Yeah, and I have learned not to stress over things that I cannot control. I have learned to not stress over things that are beyond me, and over things that I cannot change. So yeah, that's how I have been living positive life.
That's good. That's good, because of all your intersectionalities and everything that you've endured. It's good to have a practice that keeps you sane and keeps you healthy as well, because it can get a lot, and your life has not been the easiest journey. And with everything you've endured, it's just good to have practices that are keeping you sane and keeping you healthy. One of the questions I wanted to ask is, in regards to all the stereotypes that we have within the African community and the South Sudanese community, when it comes to people with disability, what do you think we need to do to combat those stereotypes, and what can be done to ensure that the next generation of African people coming here, or even the ones born here with disabilities, are not excluded and not shamed and not hidden from public?
People like me and others who are thriving in the community, who are living well with disabilities, need to speak up and raise awareness in the community. I don't think I can relax now knowing that I've already written 2 books. I still have a lot of work to do. So we need to raise awareness. People who are working in the disability area need to come together and raise awareness in the community, bring people together. I've always said, like, we have a lot of events in the African community. They always talk about these successful people. There is nothing about people with disabilities. How do we help people with disabilities? If we can give like 10 minutes or 5 minutes in every event for someone with a disability to share the experience, to me that would be really good, to raise awareness in all those angles, not just like me speaking somewhere and not even many people are hearing my voice, you know, things like that.
So the representation of voices at these events would be good.
And the radios, the African radios, like what you're doing now, raise awareness about disability. Put a program for people to talk about disability, like invite somebody, not necessarily someone with a disability, but someone who is working or who has worked in the disability area, who knows about what is going on in the disability area, somebody who works with NDIS, someone with a disability like myself. Invite those people. Just set up a time aside for disability program on the radios, and to raise awareness, and for people to also start coming out of that negativity about people with disabilities and start accepting people with disabilities in the community. I said at the beginning of this interview that if people with disabilities are given the right support, they can function as everyone else. For me, I learned to drive with all the weaknesses in my legs. I'm driving. At the moment, I'm driving normal automatic. There are people with disabilities who are driving modified cars. And there's nothing wrong with that. They are still driving like everyone else. They are driving, they have their license, they're driving cars. And like what I said earlier, that I use myself as an example, like I have come through all these stages, and the way I function now, with difficulties, with limitations, but I still function as everyone else in the community. So we need to accept people with disabilities, accept them in the community, and include them in the community, not hide them away. This is no longer the time to hide people away. We just need to, and also like community leaders need to start having those conversations and speaking up and advocating for people with disabilities. Because of the culture, there are people out there, not only people with disabilities, there are people out there who cannot speak for themselves, who are not vocal. So someone who has authority, someone in power, someone who is up there as a leader, they need to start having those conversations. Look around what is happening in the community, which area of the community is hidden, which things in the community are people not talking about. So those things, like the community leaders need to start talking about those things.
Definitely. And I was also going to state that it is important for our community to recognize that NDIS is able to provide more support that they're aware of. I know people in our community who never knew that they could access so many various services by just utilizing the NDIS provider that is publicly available to everybody with a disability. Another factor would be for our communities to start having conversations with NDIS and start providing culturally safe care and practices for people with disability from cultural backgrounds. Because I think that area is missed within the NDIS framework, where even though it's person-centered care, but they're not adding the cultural elements in it. And they're having people who are not necessarily sensitive to various cultures and various identities in spaces that's not necessarily safe for the person with a disability.
Yeah, and the work I'm doing now is working in that area with called communities to raise awareness. I will start running workshops soon. At the moment, I'm working in identifying the called communities to work with. And then later in the year, I will start running workshops to raise awareness about disability, to raise awareness about the NDIS, so that people can have an understanding of what is the NDIS, how do I apply for the NDIS, what happens after I have applied, what happens to my plan, what is the plan, things like that, so that people can have an understanding of the NDIS. And when they get the money, how do I use that money, what do I how do I get support in the community? What support services are out there in the community? So those are the kind of things that, that's the project that I'm working with. And I welcome people to contact me and we can have a chat about, so we starting to have that. And also I understand that the African Women's Federation is also doing a similar project, but theirs is short term. And so we are starting to have those conversations in the community about disability. The first community that we identified, they actually told me that in their community, they don't know what disability is. There are people in the community who live with disabilities, but they don't know what disability is.
And I think it's important for our community to be educated on disability doesn't have one look. There's several different identities when it comes to disability. It's not just the physical, and it's more, a lot of it can even be mental. And I think a lot of members of our community are dealing with mental health issues that is a disability, but they don't have the terminology or the language to claim it as a disability just yet.
And I don't think many people from the African community understand that if you have hearing impairment, that's a disability. If you have problems with your eyes, that's disability. So those kind of types of disabilities needs, that's what we're going to run down at the workshops to break them down so that people can understand first of all, what is disability and what are the types of the disability and how does disability affect people as individuals and families. So that would really be good.
No, that sounds amazing. So as we conclude, before we go, we'd like to announce that Esther Simbi has a book launch for her latest book, Blessed, Raising Two Daughters as a Single Mother with Disability. So the book launch is going to be on the 26th of June, 2021, 6:30 p.m. at the Theberton Community Centre here in South Australia. We're going to have all the details in the video description below, so you're able to contact Esther and also make a reservation for you to attend this book launch. Books are being sold at the moment for $40, so we're going to have a link available with all your information, all the details there as well. It's wonderful to see African women telling their own stories and not having their voices controlled by other people. Thank you so much, Auntie Esther, for joining us today. We look forward to attending your book launch and celebrating all your success. But before we go, is there one last thing you'd like to tell our audience?
Yes, about the book launch, entry is free. So we're not charging for entry, but we are encouraging people to make some donations at the door. And also, of course, come and buy books.
Yes, buy the books, please.
Buy the books. And we will have raffle tickets, we will be having auction, there will be beautiful items for auction and raffle. So come along, you might win something nice.
Yes. And it'll be a good networking opportunity as well to hopefully meet more African people in the community who do have a disability and see ways that we can promote and share their stories and also educate our community as well.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much.